Welcome to the new season of Sailing Doodles. There's been a lot of changes. We're going back to basics. We got a new boat and we're headed to the Bahamas and the Caribbean. There's been some crewing changes too. I'm sure a lot of you are aware of that. So the new boat is a 1989 CT56. There's a link down in the show notes of the survey of it. We'll give you a proper boat tour in a later video, but I've got a lot of work to do on the boat first. So I'm going to show you all the work we're doing on the boat to get it ready to go. Also, as said in the last video, Laura is no longer with the crew. She's doing her own thing though. She has her own channel. There's a link down below. It's La La Libra on YouTube, I believe. She has over 15,000 subscribers already. So if you'd like to follow along with her adventures, please do that. I wish her support. And I've also started a new podcast where I kind of explain more of the breakup stuff. So if you want to check that out, there'll be a link at the end of this video, or there's a link down in the show description. It's a new podcast. It's the Doodle Podcast, where I'm going to be talking to different cruisers, different people in the yachting industry, aviation industry, but it doesn't even have to be about boats. But if you'd like to check that out, and please subscribe to that. So the newest episode of the podcast will be showing one of the new crew members that's on the boat, so you can get more information about her. All right, so let's get right to it. I'm going to show you what I'm doing on the boat to get it ready, shipshape, ready to go. All right, the first thing I'm doing is that this deck paint is flaking off. It's really not in good shape. Chris over at S&J Yachts, guy who sold me the boat, is nice enough to let me borrow his pressure washer, so I'm going to pressure wash the deck, get all the old paint off so that I can repaint the deck. Basically, I'm going to try to get all the paint off, the teak varnish off, and buff the hull before putting in the water. The rest of the stuff I can actually do in the water, like I'll reapply the varnish and maybe reapply the deck paint. But I don't want to, get the water all dirty with debris from cleaning this. So.
I was hoping the pressure washing would only take a few hours or even just a day, but it ended up taking 2 days.
Well, there is an absolute ton of work to be done on this boat before we get out of here. I've already done quite a bit. You can kind of see where I pressure washed this teak versus this teak, how gray this is. It's amazing how much dirt comes out of there when you pressure wash it. Anyway, so I got that side. I haven't really decided if I'm going to treat this or what I'm going to do with the stuff that's in here. I'm going to pressure wash the rest of it to get all the dirt out. I'll probably varnish this. I don't know if I'll, this is so, got so many ridges and stuff in it that I may not be able to varnish it very well. It would need to be sanded down a lot. I already pressure washed the entire deck. Basically, there's a lot of places where the paint, the non-skid was kind of flaky, so brought all that stuff up, and gonna paint over it after I sand it down, make it nice and smooth, and then put non-skid paint on that. The cap rails are all teak, and it's a lot of work doing this, because basically, I'm trying it out one way. Like, I really intensely pressure washed this, and most of the varnish came off. I'm gonna let that dry and see how much varnish is left on there versus hand scraping with a heat gun and a scraper, because, boy, that's a lot of hard work. Because you can see this one section right there that I already hand scraped. It looks great, just needs to be sanded and then varnished, but I mean, it's 30 minutes to get a section that big. So there's a lot of work to do here.
It was really nice to see how just a little bit of work could make the boat look so much better.
So I've been working on the boat for basically 3 straight days. I mean, I only went over this once, but you can see it just looks so much better. It's not near as gray now. It looks a lot better. I've been thinking, it's like, well, why should I now go back and, sand it and then paint it again? And part of the problem my dogs have, especially when it's rough out, is that they're slipping around a lot because their feet don't grab like ours. They got like claws, right? So I'm thinking about putting a soft decking down, and really, because that non-skid paint that you put on a boat is like $150 a gallon, and I would need like 3 gallons probably at least, maybe more. And the soft foam stuff, I've seen it for like like an 8-foot by 3-foot section, something like $70. So I might just see if I can stitch that all together, and then I'll have a soft deck for the dogs to walk around on. I won't do it on the top part, but I'll do it on the bottom part here. So we'll give that a shot. I don't know. But for now, I've got to work on the teak here. So I've got the heat gun out, and I've already done just this one section. I don't know how long it took me. It took me a while. But this one section right there, the problem is I got all the way around, and then I'm not even gonna address the little stuff right now, like the trim stuff, just because I want to get on the water and get sailing. I'll do that as we go.
It was days and days of tedious work of scraping the teak, and I can't tell you how many times I burned myself. So that little 2-foot section right there took 8 minutes. So 2 feet and you got a 56-foot boat. It's 112 feet, so it's gonna be 50 times 8, whatever that is. You do the math, you got a calculator handy. It's gonna take a long time to do all this. Pretty much everything having to do with scraping the varnish and everything is a pain in the butt and really sucks, but this is by far the worst part. Reaching above me to scrape was killing my shoulders. I've just about got all the teak scraped. Kind of the finer details, like, I don't know what you call those things. Little posts there. I mean, that's gonna be a bear. I may just sand those as good as I can and just, I don't know. That would take a long time. But anyway, I've decided to farm out some work. The whole buffing. Let some professionals do that. Well, sanding now, it's starting to look pretty good. I mean, you can see the teak up front here versus the stuff I haven't sanded, and it's really starting to look good. I can't wait to get the varnish on here and just make this thing shine. It's so much work doing this. Looks pretty. It's a lot of work. It was a lot of time spent in awkward positions that just made it back-breaking work. So one other thing I'm doing is called prop speeding. It's basically he's grinding it down now to the metal, and then they put this special like silicone treatment over it that it layers on there. It's good for several years, I believe, and it just keeps all the barnacles from being able to attach there. So, you know, it's got a fresh bottom paint. I think when they pulled it out of the water, they did a bottom paint, and then we're doing the prop speed. I'm getting the hull buffed, you know, because it's really oxidized, and I mean, I'm paying them to do that and the hull. Everything else I'm doing on my own. So, just because time-wise, it'd be here forever trying to get this thing ready. There you go. Looks good. So now he's painting on the, it's like a silicone?
Yep. Yeah, this is the clear that protects the actually primer and avoid anything stick to it. It will, but time to time.
Yeah. It'll last a couple of years?
It will last a season.
A season?
Then you gotta give it a little retouch again.
Okay. So last season. So he sanded it, primed it, and now putting the silicone on it. It says it'll last a season. So there we go. So I'm having the whole buff. You can already see that the side he's buffing right now is much shinier. And then you move over to the other side, and it's definitely pretty dull. I think they're just doing it. They're cutting it now, like they cut it, compound and polish, and then they'll go back and wax it. So hopefully it'll look nice and pretty. From afar, it already looks pretty good. I don't know how good it'll look up very close, you know. All right, I've got all the wood scraped and sanded, and it's ready for varnish and all that. But I put a poll up on YouTube, and it was John Emery and Ray Russell both recommended doing epoxy first and then varnish. So I watched a video on it. There's Andy with Boatworks Today. If you're familiar with his stuff, really good stuff. The guy is, he's got over 100,000 subscribers, so he's doing something right. He's really knowledgeable with his boat stuff. So that's how I learned to do this. And so basically what I did is I got some epoxy resin, the clear hardener, and of course you need acetone to make sure that there's no oils and stuff on the wood. But I'm gonna wipe the wood down with oil with the acetone real quick to get all the oils off the surface. And then you do 2 coats, maybe 3 coats of the epoxy. But the great thing is you can do 3 coats like in the same day. Whereas varnish, you would have to wait 24 hours and you need like 7 or 8 coats. You do a couple coats of epoxy, you can do them back to back, wait 24 hours, and then you can do 2 or 3 coats of varnish, and it should last a lot longer too. So there, I probably popped up a link there for Andy's thing. If you leave a comment, say, hey, the Sailing Doodles sent you or something. I don't know him at all, haven't talked to him, but really knowledgeable stuff. So anyway, I'm gonna get to work here. First coat is done. I think it looks really good. Yeah, I mean, that's gonna look so nice. Get about 2 more coats of that on there. And then I'm gonna look into it, either doing the varnish, or I've heard people are doing like a polyurethane finish on top a couple times, just cause it's easier than varnish. You can learn anything on YouTube. I'm gonna look it up right now. I've just finished putting on the 2nd coat of epoxy. I'm gonna do 3 today. That's kind of the nice thing, is that, unlike varnish, which is, if you do like 10 coats, it takes you at least 10 days, right? This stuff, you can do 3 coats of this, and then put 3 coats of varnish over the next 3 days and you're good to go. One thing to keep in mind is you have to go back, and as this stuff cures, it'll kind of bubble up. So you have to kind of knock down the bubbles before it cures, otherwise you'll have these big bubbles and you got to sand them out and you got to sand it down and then put another coat on. So, you know, just every, I'm just sitting there on the patio drinking a beer, or in the cockpit there drinking a beer. So, every 10 minutes or so I'll get up and kind of walk around the boat and knock down the bubbles. And after about 45 minutes or so, there's not any more bubbles. It has been a lot of work, but I got all of the cap rails sanded and scraped and all the teak off. I've got everything taped up. So I'm about ready to lay down some epoxy. You got Bill, he's a patron down there. He's been here all week helping out. Anyway, so I'm gonna lay down the epoxy. I gotta wipe it with acetone first just to kind of get all the oils off the surface. And the good thing about the epoxy is it supposedly lasts longer too. A varnish, you just lightly sand the varnish every couple years and then put a new coat or two of varnish on there, and then you're fine. Because the epoxy really protects the wood a little better, like keeps the moisture out better. Got the first side done, haven't done the other side yet. It's quite a bit of work actually, putting down the coat. Two things I learned. Make small batches of epoxy instead of like a bigger batch, because I did like 8 pumps at first, and by the time I was running towards the end of that batch, it was getting too tacky to apply. So I started doing like 4 pumps, and then it was still pretty easy to apply the rest of the way. And I think there's less air bubbles if you put it on a little thinner, because there are a lot of air bubbles. And so after you apply it, you have to basically, for the next 30-40 minutes, I'm just walking up and down the rail with the brush, just kind of lightly brushing it just to brush out the air bubbles that pop up. I think after because from working on this other stuff, the air bubbles on the second and third coat were much less. I think it has to do with some of the, the trapped gas in the wood and all that. So, but definitely, the next 2 applications should be a lot easier. But now I'm gonna go to lunch. The dogs are hungry now, they're down there.
So be sure to tune into the next episode as we put the boat in the water and set off towards the Caribbean. Be sure to check the link in the show notes for the new Doodles Podcast. Monday is the last day for our patrons to register for the patron sale in the Bahamas, February 1st through the 8th.